Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Got a quicker one for everybody today. This patient is a pediatric patient, so I believe she's 15 or 16. You can see really deep composite filling on there. That's what the tooth looks like, and it didn't probe, but you could see the infection was pretty decent sized here. So we're gonna go through the process. The question always has been with GentleWave is it appropriate, okay to use in pediatric patients? And I found on teenagers it's really quite predictable and helps a lot. In a case like this, when you have that gnarly infection, I think it's because the tubules are wider. I'm not sure. I've seen more failures in pediatric patients one-stepping, and I tend to like to use calcium hydroxide. So in this case, though, the GentleWave is able to clean everything out really nicely. We're able to finish it in a single visit, which is very, very cool. Now, you'll see me using the prep burr here rather than the regular skinny diamond, the workhorse. And the reason why is because drilling through that much composite, it tends to strip off the prep burr or the skinny diamond really quickly. And I kind of was just trying to see if the prep burr would work a little bit better. It did. The access is still pretty conservative. I do think I could have been a little more conservative with the skinny diamond. So let me know in the comments when you see the final if you think, I probably should have gone smaller. With a case like this, you can see it's a little too far to the mesial, and had I used the other diamond, I think it would have made a difference. This, I didn't do any cuts as well. I did speed up a few more things because the last time I did a full long video, I felt like I was talking for way, way too long. I know I have a YouTube channel and you think I don't actually like talking. I just want to share these cases and hopefully some people out there will learn a few things, but you can see the pus inside the tooth, not looking too happy inside there. Always on kids, make sure you go in between the two mesials on lower molars to check for a mid-mesial. It's pretty much the only canal that the incidence is far higher than it is in adults, where it's more in pediatric patients. So that was it, by the way. 2 minutes in, we've done all we need to do, and we are now going to run the GentleWave and do that process. So, like I said, I didn't make any cuts here. That's one of the beautiful things with the GentleWave, and for those of you who have been on the fence about it, this is one of the benefits that I've always enjoyed is you don't really have to use as many rotary files. You don't have to remove as much tooth structure. And I tend to use the GentleWave machine more as I'd say instrumenting device than necessarily as something that cleans it all out. So it is time to build that platform. Go ahead and use the sound seal. You'll see here with that party time clamp how much easier this is. I'm working on getting some B-roll footage, but suffice it to say, I love these party time clamps and their Houdini ones for premolars. It makes a huge difference. If we know we're going to use the GentleWave at this point, we're putting this on regardless. It works so much better. If anybody knows where I can get one that's shaped like a 14 rather than the asymmetrical jaws, I would much prefer to have that. But look at that. You have a mile of space there. It works so well. What's going on behind this, I did speed this up a little bit, is we are pretty much, as Jenny calls it, frosting the cake. So building that up so that it holds it. And another tip here is to use file forceps to hold that matrix because it can be a little bit wobbly as you see there. Once you get it in place though, you can hold it with your finger and then go in, smooth this out with a glick. That helps the, let's say, cake frosting part that's attached to the matrix attached to the part that you've already done as well. By the way, I was having a little bit of trouble remembering in a previous video what that former thing was called. They like to call it the matrix. So obviously not the Keanu Reeves one.
I know Kung Fu.
But definitely Matrix, and yes, he knows Kung Fu. All right, so pop this off. I like to use the Endo Explorer to remove it as well. If you try to pull it, oftentimes you'll pull off the entire platform with it, which isn't good. Make sure you light cure that as well. And in this case, there was a little piece that had fallen down. Usually you don't have to go back and drill around it, but because that little piece, you'll see it flip out right there, I wanted to remove that. So we're gonna go ahead and run the GentleWave here, and this is sped up, I think, a lot. I think the final time on the GentleWave was almost 9 minutes, but you'll see sometimes you have to adjust a little bit, but once you see that stream running through the middle, you're good to go. And I like to kind of flip around which hand I use. I don't want to, static movements, I guess I shouldn't say movements, but static like forcing on your hand isn't really healthy for you from an ergonomic standpoint. So I'll use the left hand on one, I'll use the right hand on the other. I'll use my, you try to not hold that same position for that amount of time because it can lead to over fatiguing of different muscles, which is not good. So you can see me switching over there, using my left hand, et cetera, et cetera. And if you haven't tried before, try using it with your left hand. And if you have a cart on the right hand side, I can get most of my note done while working on this, because once it's locked in, there's an audio cue to it, it working. So ran the cycle, very uneventful as far as this one, and we're gonna get ready to seal it up here. So really pleased with how this one worked, because it really did get a lot of junk out of there. So pop that off with some forceps and use the microsuction to get the initial bit of water, because that's the final rinse that they do. You can see me checking here. I want to make sure that there wasn't a second distal. It is kind of broad. You'll be able to tell that when I do the photos here, but wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything else I needed to clean. Every now and then the GentleWave will uncover some extra anatomy or other areas you need to kind of address. So just keep that in mind. Go ahead and dry with paper points, and really we're going to squirt fill this and call it a day. So a couple tips here. If you haven't done this technique before, make sure you have a close to, accurate working length with this. I didn't really adjust the occlusion too much here, so it's very close to being accurate. And with the squirt fill, it's going to go where it wants to go anyway. So here's what those look like. No mid-mesial, but you can see that little groove, so you want to make sure that's cleaned off. My mirror, however, was not cleaned off, so you can see the kind of film on top of there, but that's what it looks like as far as the mesials. And then the distal, you can see how it's a little bit broad there. I wanted to make sure that wasn't an extra canal that I had to go back down into. So at this point, we're ready to seal it up. Squirt fill for this one. So plus on the paper points down to the apex, and then we're going to go back with a 20K file to the working length from the comb beam. So this is why having that comb beam is very helpful. Not only do you have an idea of what you're getting into in angulation, that's where I get all my working lengths, and so I can be more accurate and not waste as much time. By the way, this is why we don't do hand filing videos on live patients, because all you see is a giant green glove. And so that one, I think it was the MB here, was a little tight, so had to go back down again. And same thing on the distals. You'll see me do some hand filing again, just to make sure we're all the way. It's watch winding. That's what it is. You go back and forth. It's pretty straightforward. I can make a video on watch winding if you want, but it's literally you just go back and forth, kind of like that, with a little bit of apical pressure, and you're usually good to go. So squirt technique here, BNL beta with a soft gutta percha at 230 degrees, and go right in with the 35. You guys have seen this before. Now, with the GentleWave, sometimes you need to be a little more cautious with the squirt technique because it removes so much stuff, there's not as much back pressure. In her case, because this was the first time anyone's been inside these canals, I was able to keep everything nice and tiny, so the amount of pressure that's going to be created apically is very small. Where this becomes an issue is if you have a retreat with a large apical finding, large existing sizes, and you want to use the GentleWave as well as do the squirt technique. In those cases, sometimes I will fit cones if I'm very concerned, or I'm going to vary the pressure. And that can be both the pressure of how hard I push the gun on the beta, that can be the pressure of how far I push down apically, and it can be whether or not I'm going to use the PacMac. In her case, because everything was nice and tiny to begin with, and I really only took the 2006 down maybe about 2/3 of the way, the apical third was very much as it was to begin with. It was a skinny tooth, so wasn't too worried about overfilling here. But if you haven't done a bunch of cases with the squirt technique, that is one thing to keep in mind. Be cautious with anything that has a large apical finding or has large existing apical sizes, and try not to take things too large in the apical region. Don't be an apical barbarian because then you're going to have a lot of overfills, which A, doesn't look good, and B, can lead to some complications long term. And that's pretty much it for the squirt technique. Now, you will notice there's usually a sealer puff in these. That's because of the pressure. It helps carry the sealer down there. That doesn't bother me at all. I know there's a commenter asking about the long fill. I don't consider a little puff of sealer out the apex to be long. That's how I've always done it. That's how I was brought up. It's a very West Coast way of thinking, hopefully global at this point, but there are still some East Coast schools who consider that to be an overfill and would be considered a fail. So if you're at a school who does that, just be aware that might be the case. Pac-Mac here to make sure we get those voids cleaned out. Once again, I use the Pac-Mac here because it was skinny to begin with. I'm not worried about an overfill. I will be extra cautious on cases that are retreats or, weird cases where it's a large apical size, because the Pac-Mac is, as my friend Jared used to say, it's like a chainsaw. That thing doesn't care. It is very aggressive. So if you haven't used that, I'd recommend practicing on some extracted teeth or blocks first, because it can be more aggressive than you think, and there is some nuance to how far down you take it. There's, as with everything that I say, I feel like I should start making shirts that just say it depends, because it truly does depend on what I'm going to do here. That's why I said I'd never teach the square technique, and here we are. So I did cut out the minute or so that it took to do the x-ray, but it looked good, so we're going to seal it up. In this case, patient is 16 years old. She is still finishing braces, so there's not going to be a crown on this for a while. I'm going to use Build It here because it actually holds up pretty well under occlusal load. It's a macrofill, and it doesn't look pretty, but it is very strong. It also has almost the same strength as amalgam of incompressive, so I absolutely love it for that sort of thing. Using the blaster here, I am having a hell of a time with my ASI cart in one of the rooms. The water just does not want to come out of here. I've had a technician out like 5 times, and it works for a day, and then it doesn't work. So in case you're wondering why it's a giant mess, if you ever use air abrasion, make sure you have water attached to it, because it makes a huge mess if you don't have it there. Patient was sedated. She didn't care. So that's always nice. But you can see it doesn't do quite as good of a job either. So technician's going to come out this week, and hopefully we'll finally get this thing fixed. But here we know, who knows. So go ahead and do the etch here like we normally do. I still like total etching. I think it does make a difference because a lot of people who are smarter than me told me it makes a difference. So I'm going off of what they said. You don't have to etch with any of the self-etching primers and bonding agents, but from what I've gathered, it works better if you do. So that's why I do it, to answer just another question that I know I've seen a couple times in the comments. So make sure you do the full 15 seconds, and you can see in the pictures, it looks really nice when you dry it out like that too. I think that's part of the reason, is because the etch does make it look pretty for pictures. So that's what we're looking like there. You can see how much better the still photos are than the video, by the way. That's a discussion for a different day. But the EOS RPs don't actually record in 4K, but they shoot in greater than 4K for still pictures. So that's why the pictures will sometimes look better than the video feed. So fun fact, but this is a endo thing. You don't need it to be in proper 4K. The upscaling does a decent enough job. So this is the room that has the 2-bottle system. Still works great. It's just the 1-bottle system, based on my year of using it so far, works just as well. So we're going to use up this 2-bottle and then switch this to a single bottle for both rooms. Try to keep everything. If you're building an office, try to keep both rooms identical if possible, so there's no confusion for assistants when flipping between them. And we're going to seal everything up here. This was a new assistant that was working with me here, so she's taking her sweet time mixing. That's why this is sped up. But I don't want you guys to have to wait there just looking at a boring tooth for the whole time. So seal it up, and like I said, I like using Build It here. It makes it pretty easy to see where my part is. The composite that was done there was very, very well done. So normally I would remove everything, get one solid core, but in this case, because all I had to do was just a simple, class 1 pretty much, the composite on the outside is still nice and intact. It didn't have any issue, and you would actually see it with the GentleWave. If there were problems, it would very clearly not work with that. You can see gaps developing between where the composite and the tooth meet. You could see dislodgement. I see this all the time with crowns where they weren't cemented well, or they have caries, that the GentleWave process actually pulls out pretty much anything that's not rock solid. So it's almost a nice test. At this point, we're just polishing up. That barrel burr is perfect for this sort of thing to get the occlusal anatomy. I don't have to make it as perfect as possible because there's always going to be some slight fine tuning at the end of ortho. And in her case, this tooth does need a crown. Even though the access isn't that big, once again, I could have gone smaller, and I wish I would have could be slightly better. It's one of those nitpicky things. I hate about 95% of the cases that I do. And it's for small things like that. Like, I could have done 1 more millimeter distally and saved a little bit more, but really most of it was composite, and that's why I use the larger burr. So let me know if you think I should have done something differently, but this is kind of how that one turned out. So you can see the anatomy. It's very basic, no tertiary stuff because it's all going to get prepped out anyway. Do our final picture here and then adjust the bite off camera. So that's what it looks like. Like I said, whoever did the initial composite did a really nice job, and there's where we look like as far as the final x-ray. Nice and skinny, small little ciliary puffs. I know all of you care about the time for things, so total treatment time was just under 27 minutes from when I sat down to when we stopped recording. Took a little bit under 3 minutes to do the entire access, and that includes putting the rubber dam on, some of the stuff I cut out. Platform building in about 3 minutes is pretty darn good. It takes about that long, unfortunately. It takes a little bit of time. The whole GentleWave procedure took a little bit over 9 minutes. Obturation was about 5, and the restoration was about 6. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. As always, if you have any questions, please drop them below. Thank you so much for watching. If any of you are going to be at the AAE, I'm going to try to get at least another video. It's been a little crazy because I've been slamming patients in because I'm gone for almost the entire week for the AAE in a couple of weeks. But if any of you are going to be there, please come say hi to me. I will be for sure hanging out on the trade floor. I already have a list of things I got to go buy. But thanks guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you all next time.